Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to everybody in our CCL community, especially our guests. Thank you for joining the discussion tonight. Our agenda tonight will start with a couple of short introductions before we will hear from Luke Bowler, Chief External Affairs Officer for ClearPath, with us to discuss ClearPath action. So we want to thank Luke for joining us.
Greg, thank you. And thanks, Mindy, and all of you with the Citizen Climate Lobby. Really happy to be joining you all. So ClearPath, similar to Craig's story, we were founded probably right after y'all in 2014. Greg mentioned our founder, Jay Faison, who was a business guy in Charlotte, North Carolina, didn't work in the energy field. He was actually an audio-visual company called Snap AV. And he had the good fortune of selling it to private equity. I think it's, a lot of small business dreams of that. And so he had did really well financially with that. He was a lifelong Republican, but also deeply concerned and cared about climate change, and saw a big gap in the party. And so he started to think about what he could do in terms of solutions. And so he founded ClearPath. Essentially, we're a DC-based nonprofit. Primarily, we're a think tank out of ClearPath. So we come up with policy ideas, policy concepts, do a lot of think tank type things, research papers, etc. And then where I spend a lot of my time is ClearPath Action, which is our 501c4, where we can do the direct advocacy. We also have registered lobbyists who are able to go in and lobby Capitol Hill. And we focus on climate policies and clean energy policies. So we've primarily and historically been focused in the power sector. And we like to say we focus on baseload clean energy. So that's been nuclear power, fossil energy with carbon capture, renewables like geothermal and hydropower, and grid scale long duration battery storage. Our portfolio hasn't included wind and solar, not because we don't like it or support it, we do. There was a lot of advocacy already around that. And so we've also taken on a little bit of industrial policy. So when I say that, think petrochemicals, ethanol plants, steel, cement and concrete, and how do those industries decarbonize? The trajectory for the energy sector with carbon dioxide emissions is going down pretty significantly over the last 15, 20 years. Where the industrial sector, carbon dioxide emissions is going up. It's actually now the largest sector. A lot of folks might think transportation or energy or ag would be the biggest. It's now technically the industrial sector with the largest emissions. And so what are the policies that can help drive innovations in the industrial sectors that will help ultimately bring down carbon dioxide emissions? And really what we do a lot of is help Republicans get better messaging on climate policies. So we've done a lot of polling over the years. We do dial testing and focus groups. So there were 6 pillars. They called them pillars, but the six areas of policy are unlocking American resources. So that's bread and butter, Republican, traditional fossil energy. We need more of it, but it's beyond that, right? It's talking more about things like critical minerals and other technologies that we need to have access to. Letting America build, and that's really a nice way of saying modernizing permitting. We can talk about all of the policies that have led to where we are today that we can finance and authorize and provide tax incentives for clean energy technology, but right now, it's going to be really hard and take too long to build any of that stuff because it's incredibly difficult to get a permit for any project. That's true for wind, that's true for solar, it's true for a transmission line, that's definitely true for pipelines. So sort of a modernized permitting agenda is the second pillar. The third pillar is on innovation, American innovation. So you'll see a lot of policies around increasing research and development, both for the Department of Energy, but the National Lab complex. There's a wonderful national lab in Ames, Iowa. I think that's the only one in your region. But the national labs do some incredible work on bringing together a lot of the world's brightest minds and scientists, and sort of what technologies we can do. A lot of the grid scale battery technologies are coming out of the labs. Next generation nuclear energy are coming out of the labs. And so what are those next generation of technologies? So American innovation is the third pillar. The fourth one, they call it beat China and Russia. So that's what it sounds like. That's sort of an American competitiveness policy. And more specifically, what that means is it's sort of twofold. It's trade policy. You'll see some trade policies that will encourage manufacturing and other industries to reshore back in the United States. And the message there is pretty clear. That's good climate policy because American environmental standards are the strictest in the world. So if we're able to bring some of this manufacturing back to the US, obviously it's good for a lot of reasons, including all of the jobs in y'all's communities, but it's actually very good climate policy because making anything here in the US is naturally going to be cleaner than making it in somewhere like China. And then the other two pillars, ClearPath doesn't work on as closely, but also very, very important. One being the conservation. So you've probably heard some Republicans talk about trillion trees. That's one of the policies out there. There's some other conservation forestry type policies. And then the sixth and final policy pillar is building resilient communities. So that will be disaster mitigation policies, some adaptation things, but primarily more around like flood protection and building resilient communities. So those six pillars were being introduced starting in June. The task force that Representatives Feenstra, Dusty Johnson, and Pete Stauber are all part of. They've been having sort of not super public events to roll these out. They've been doing more like stakeholder engagement type events, but they're all out there, they're all public. And then this task force, the Energy, Climate, and Conservation Task Force, will now, as of this coming Friday, 2 days from now, be packaged together with the whole House Republican agenda. And the reason they're doing that is obvious, that there's a strong likeliness they're going to take back the majority. And so as they're going into the meat of the election cycle, they can say, vote for us, here's what we're for.
Not sure if you heard that with him breaking off, but he was asking, what advice do you have for working with conservative offices on climate? And then also, are there differences if you're working with a House representative compared to on the Senate side?
Yes, they're very different. I worked in both, so they're very different. I think, one of the best pieces of advice that we try to give people is that when a Republican member does something good on the climate, call them, email them, tweet at them, thank them. They need to hear that. A lot of them feel like they're kind of on the edge of a cliff. I've actually heard members of Congress tell us that they feel like they're on the edge of a cliff when it comes to climate. They think it's the right place and good for the party, but not everyone in the party agrees. And so for them to hear from constituents is really important. And you as one and your partner two, but like if you get a handful of people calling into an office, it actually means more than you know. My first job was when a Senator Grassley's mailroom. So I read every piece that came in and like got it out to the right staffers that were going to correspond. But the positive stuff means so much, because most of what you get in a congressional office is like, we're so mad at you for this, or why are you so terrible? And that comes in all the time. And so the positive stuff means a lot. So that would be my most simple piece of advice. I do think they rely on folks like you all for education. They're not just doing energy and climate policy, they're doing everything else. And, you know, their staffs are small bandwidths as well. They're doing everything else. And so when you can give them some constructive pieces of education, that goes a long way. Now that piece I would say is more important for House members. They're smaller staff. An average member of Congress's DC office might be like 8 or 10 people, and a Senate office you probably have 25, 30. So you have more like individual specialized staff members in the Senate. So the education is really, really important in the House. So keep that in mind. If there's something that you can, you know, get to them and to their staffs, they actually do appreciate that. I guess one of the main differences is, you know, being statewide. Well, I guess it's maybe not as true for Dusty Johnson in South Dakota, but when you're a senator and you have statewide, it's tough to get around and be in every community and all the different media markets. And so the more you can kind of help them in your communities, like that's also really appreciative. Whereas a House member, they're just there more because it's less ground to cover. And so when you can be, you know, singing their praises, you know, thanking them for the work they do on climate, but also sharing it with other people, that goes a long ways as well.
The letter to the editors too in the local communities. We had a campaign in the state here where Gotti and the team got letters published in every county in the state this past year.
They absolutely read those. They absolutely read those. Like every member of Congress has somebody in their office compile daily clips. So anywhere they're mentioned in any news report gets put into a packet or an email, and they'll read those. So that's great if you're doing letters to the editor. That's really important.
Good. So our next question is from Tim Connor.
And so that brings us to the question. Can you share if carbon pricing was discussed as a potential solution by the task force?
It was. I know it was. And I think you had probably the members you know that are real supportive and would push for it. And then you have some of the members that weren't. Garrett Graves, who led the task force, he's, I think, pretty outspoken against a carbon price. That's kind of been his position. I couldn't tell you exactly why, but it was discussed. I don't know that it will be, well, I don't think it will be in the final package as a specific carbon price. I do understand there's a lot of interest around something like a carbon border adjustment, which I'm not sure where CCL is as a whole on that, or where you are, but I think some of the benefits could be similar in a mechanism like that. So you could see something like that in the final package. Tough one on that was that you didn't have some of the Democrats pushing for it in the Inflation Reduction Act, which was largely just a tax bill, right? It was reconciliation. And I kind of thought there was going to be some more support from some of the Democrats who have been out there supporting it. But you didn't see it there either. So I'm not exactly sure vehicle-wise what would be next for that. If it's not in what passed this year, and it doesn't seem like it would be part of this task force plan, which I should add, I didn't say this at the beginning, but sort of the reason for doing this whole task force policy agenda, that'll turn into legislation, like a comprehensive bill next year if they take the majority. So probably early in their package, each of these big comprehensive policy will be a like HR something, HR 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be my guess.
I'm going to call on Linda, who.
So maybe we can just dive a little deeper into how that border adjustment might be set up so that we have that sort of continued push. If we're saying we need to value the attribute of carbon intensity or lower carbon intensity, how do we continue to ratchet that lower so that we continue to make progress in globally in those emissions. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I would not be the right person to give you the economic answer of how good it would work. But I can tell you some process. Kramer's terrific. We love Kramer. We had a meeting with him recently. You probably were involved, but I guess it was maybe 6 months ago. He and Sullivan from Alaska got together and put out policy idea that had a lot of these types of concepts in it, which was really good to see. So they had support from a lot of different Republican members. I think Ted Cruz and John Kennedy and Capito were part of that. So those are all, some big name senators. There hasn't been anybody in the House who's really taken it on, to my knowledge. Maybe there is, they just haven't vocalized it very much yet, or we haven't met with them. But I think that would be a next step.
Because the reason I'm such a fan of carbon fee and dividend, or just a carbon price, is that there's pretty strong analysis that, look, if you tax this stuff, then it will drive down emissions. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We sort of high level, we think of climate policy as more of a chronic condition rather than a one policy that will solve it forever. It will need constant maintenance and new policies and new ideas and concepts for years, decades. So that's sort of how we view it. So that's why we've at ClearPath have taken a real bullish stance on the innovation side, because it's the next generation of technologies that we think we need. And so yes, the R&D and the innovation policies up front would be really helpful to get those demonstrated. That has historically been a lot of early stage government support. I know as conservatives, we cringe sometimes as when we hear that, but the example we like to give is hydraulic fracturing. Maybe not the cleanest technology out there, but pretty clean and driving and led to a lot of emissions reductions in the United States. If you look at how the hydraulic fracturing, the Mitchell family in Texas had this idea to do horizontal drilling. They had this concept. They went to the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy funded a bunch of early stage research and development. There was a tax credit along with that. The technology scaled up in the 80s, 90s, and then early 2000s, you had the natural gas boom, largely because of that technology. So that kind of helping that commercialization scale up is a perfect case study of what we kind of like to see with the next generation of technologies. And so we've kind of taken more of like the tax incentive approach. So I don't know if that exactly answers your, there's probably some debate in the conservative circles of whether that's free market or not, but we've seen it work. And so that's been kind of our thing, is like, we need to scale up next generation of technologies. And the other thing that we often talk about and why we support that is this is a global challenge, and the rest of the world right now is growing a lot faster than ours, which means they're turning more power on and industrializing, which means they're going to be emitting a lot more than they are today. So will they choose clean energy, or will they choose the dirtier Chinese coal, the unmitigated old technologies that they're choosing today? They're going to go with what's cheapest. And so from our perspective, we want to make clean energy more affordable and make it here in the United States, and make it so affordable that the other countries who are rapidly growing choose American clean energy technology instead of something like an unmitigated Chinese coal facility. The answer is that most Republicans have been real reluctant to put targets on anything, and that's we've made some attempts at that. I don't know what the barrier is mentally, but they've been reluctant to put targets on it. Now I will say that the one big exception, Linda, to your point, is the Kramer and Sullivan plan had a 40% global reduction target that they estimated their bill could get to 40% reduction, which, you know, it's not 50, but it's good. And it was also, to our knowledge, the first time Republicans really put a aggressive target out there publicly. So I think that there's some synergies happening with he and his staff on the task force. So I could see something like a 40% target in that task force plan. I would encourage you all to keep advocating for higher. I think it's important for them to hear that. But I would say that that's probably might be as big a number as they'd go to. Quick thing to add, Larry, the one that you mentioned, net zero by 2050, that target has had more support. And I think the reason is that most publicly traded utilities in America have a business goal of net zero by 2050. And so, you know, they're pretty big political players in every state too, and they've already gone out with a big net zero by 2050 commitment. That makes it more politically palatable for Republicans.
Appreciate it.
Luke, thank you for this presentation. Speak to when reaching out to conservatives, what have you found are ways that you would encourage people? We have conservatives reaching out to conservatives, and we have liberals reaching out to conservatives. We call them friends of the caucus, and they come to our GOP events to help us table. And what would you do to help us in terms of our messaging?
Well, we have a bunch of resources we'd be happy to share. One, we do like that Frank Luntz focus group. Like I can share any of that. Some of it we've public on our various websites, our clearpath.org and clearpathaction.org. So that's available, and we can hone in on any of it that's helpful. I think that when you're talking to conservatives, and the reason why I'm saying this is because when we do our focus groups, we do like a Trump 16, Trump 20 voter, and then we'll do separate focus groups with somebody like a Trump 16, Biden 20 voter, like a traditional swing voter. We try to figure what works with both, because ultimately Republican members need to know, okay, I'm not going to upset my base conservative voter. Like that's, you know, cardinal sin in politics. So they don't want to do that. But they're always, they need to and want to attract the moderate independents as well. And so what messages work with them? And what we've found are actually really aligned with how they're talking about these 6 pillars. So those are all message tested and work really well. So when you talk about like American competitiveness, that works incredibly well. Talk about American innovation, that works really well. Where it gets a little tricky, which is a little counterproductive for your organization and our organization, is the terms climate change. Depending on your member, they still get a little apprehensive. You know, can't put the psychological finger on that, but it's the case still. But when you just say climate or clean energy or lowering emissions, they're like, absolutely, we should totally do this. And the other thing we found that works, which is, it's kind of a no-brainer, but talking about what we all do anyway is the next generation and leaving our planet a better place. And that resonates, what we found with conservative voters, but also the members of Congress too. And talking about their kids and grandkids, I think is, you know, it sounds cheesy and simple, but it actually does. You know, I think it is important, and frankly, we're often jealous of CCL that you have such an amazing network around, and you can be doing the grassroots stuff, and we're just a, you know, DC focused group. So it's great to be able to partner with you all, and thank you all for what you all do. I do think it's important when you're talking to them is to lead with that the climate is changing and global industrial activities contributing to it. That outside of a handful of members is fine. And then I think it's, you know, we want to come up with the conservative solutions to this that are good for our economy, good for our jobs, and good for lowering global emissions. The other thing that we like to stress is that, you know, we want to take away the false choices in climate, that this should never be a Democrat versus Republican, or fossil versus renewables, or, you know, global emissions versus doing nothing at home. There's just a lot of false choices, and kind of like eliminating those false choices that, you know, we may not have the exact same solutions, but we want to work on something that's going to make a significant impact. And there's usually room for compromise. I mean, these are all high level thinkers in Congress, or at least most of them. So they do want to come up with solutions and find consensus. So I think just reminding them that there are conservatives that care about this stuff and are working on this stuff is just, it's awesome that you guys do that. So thank you.
Good. And Luke, I will say wow for everybody here. I feel like there's candor and perspective. And so thank you for sharing that with us tonight. So Luke, I know it's later on the East Coast. We appreciate your time here. And again, your candor. I feel like I was at the insider's table listening to you talk and share your perspective. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank
And
you.
with that,
y'all have a good night.
Take care.
Thank you.